In the shadow of empire-building legends, one name echoed through the ages not for piety or justice, but for sheer conquest. Timur, the lame conqueror, rose from the steppes of Central Asia with a vision written in fire and blood. While Europe whispered of knights and castles, the East trembled at the thunder of his cavalry. His path was not of tradition, but of terror meticulously crafted. Across the horizon, another empire stood unshaken, its sultan known as the Thunderbolt. Bayezid I of the Ottomans had never known defeat. Until now. Bayezid had rewritten the rules of war. His elite janissaries were the finest infantry the world had ever seen. His cannons shattered walls like parchment. His empire stretched from the Danube to the Euphrates, each victory etched into Ottoman legacy. He fought like a machine, relentless and precise. But empires built on fear often forget one truth. Arrogance blinds even the sharpest sword. As Timur's shadow crept toward Anatolia, Bayezid saw not a threat, but a conquest waiting to be claimed. Timur did not march like a sultan. He flowed like a storm. His army was a mosaic of nations, each unit masterfully chosen for its role in his grand design. War elephants trampled fear into the earth. Mounted archers danced death from horseback. And behind them, siege engines that could breach the heavens themselves. Where Bayezid built an empire with discipline, Timur forged his with chaos. He knew the Ottomans' strength. And he would twist it into their doom. Picture this war as a game of chess. Bayezid, the White King, sat immovable at the center of the board. His pawns were his janissaries, his bishops his cannons, his knights his cavalry. Each move was calculated, each strategy flawless. But chess is a game of patterns. And Timur was a player who did not follow the board. He saw beyond the lines, striking not where the king was strong, but where he was certain. And certainty, as emperors soon learn, is a fatal flaw. Timur understood what others did not. War was not about strength alone, but deception. He baited Bayezid with scorched villages and fleeing refugees, luring the Ottoman army into terrain where discipline meant nothing and survival everything. The Thunderbolt, hungry for glory, charged forward. He sought a battlefield of his choosing. He found instead a trap meticulously woven in dust and shadow. The chase had become the hunted. On the plains of Ankara, two titans would collide. Bayezid, armored in gold and pride, commanded an army that had never bowed. Timur, cloaked in strategy and silence, led a force born from fire and fury. The Ottomans formed their lines with mechanical precision. The janissaries stood like a wall of death. Cannons roared. The earth trembled. But Timur did not flinch. He had already won the war before the first sword was drawn. Timur struck where emperors feared to look. Not at their armies, but at their supply lines. In one night, his raiders turned Bayezid's lifeline to ash. No food. No water. No escape. The mighty Ottoman host, once unstoppable, now stood tethered to a noose of their own making. Discipline meant order. And order, when broken, becomes chaos. Timur did not need to defeat Bayezid's army. He only needed to starve it. The sun beat mercilessly upon the Ottoman ranks. Thirst cracked their lips. Hunger gnawed at their resolve. Bayezid's perfect formations began to fray. Men collapsed. Commanders shouted over the cries of the dying. Timur watched from afar, patient as a spider in its web. He had turned the Thunderbolt's greatest strength, his unyielding discipline, into his most crippling weakness. An army that could not move was an army already dead. As the final hour approached, two men stood at the precipice of destiny. Bayezid, golden armored and wrathful, refused to yield. His honor demanded victory or death. Timur, draped in silence and shadow, had already rewritten the rules of engagement. He had turned the battlefield into a puzzle, and every piece moved in his favor. The Thunderbolt would soon learn that legends are not born from strength alone. They are forged in the mind of a man who sees the end before the beginning. The trap was complete. Bayezid's army, once a force of nature, now stood encircled by a storm of steel and vengeance. Timur's drums echoed like heartbeats of doom. The greatest Ottoman victory was moments away from becoming the empire's greatest humiliation. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable strategy? The answer would echo through centuries. But first, one man would fall and another would rise. The reckoning was at hand. The circle tightened like a noose. Bayezid's janissaries formed a desperate ring, backs to their horses, shields locked, swords thirsty. Timur's riders circled like wolves, arrows hissing, hooves drumming the cracked earth. No quarter was asked. None would be given. The Sultan's banner still flew, but hope began to fray. Bayezid's breath came in fire. His armor, once radiant, now bore the scars of 1,000 strikes. He saw his men fall and felt each death like a dagger in his chest. Yet his voice boomed across the field, rallying the last of his guard. A king does not flee. A sultan dies on his feet. Timur did not cheer. He did not smile. Victory was not a moment to celebrate, but a thread in the grand design. He raised his hand. The lances dipped. The charge would come. Not with fury, but with the precision of fate. He had outweighted empires before. This one would be no different. Some broke. Youth, fear, instinct, they fled where honor could not hold them. Hooves thundered. Arrows found their marks. The gap closed like a mouth around prey. Mercy was not part of the lesson Timur intended to teach. Every escape was met with swift and brutal correction. Steel rang against steel. The Sultan's blade cut deep, but the general's return strike opened a gash on Bayezid's shoulder. They fought like titans, neither yielding, neither blinking at the pain. Around them, the battle raged, but in that moment, two wills clashed that would decide the fate of nations. Timur saw the duel. He saw the fire in Bayezid's eyes, the strength that would not surrender. He admired it. But admiration did not halt strategy. A flick of his fingers, and 100 bows rose. Not for the general. For the Sultan. The trap would not fail. Not now. Not for pride. The sky darkened with arrows. Bayezid turned, his sword still raised, his men shouting warnings too late. The first struck his thigh. Another pierced his arm. He staggered but did not fall. A lion wounded, but not broken. His defiance burned brighter than the pain. His legs gave way. The sword clattered against the stones. Bayezid knelt, blood soaking the earth beneath him. Around him, the field fell silent. Even Timur's men paused. A sultan on his knees was not a man defeated, it was history rewritten. The Ottoman army stared, stunned into stillness. Timur approached, not in triumph, but in acknowledgement. He dismounted, his boots crunching on broken weapons. He looked down at the kneeling sultan, who refused to bow his head. Their eyes met. One was the storm. The other, the flame that would not be extinguished. The crown was lifted. The armor was stripped. Bayezid was carried away, not as a prisoner, but as a relic of what was. His army, scattered and silent, watched their empire's symbol fall into shadow. Timur had not just won a battle. He had ended an age. The tent was heavy with silence. No chains rattled, no guards spoke. Timur circled Bayezid slowly, taking in the stillness of the man who once commanded armies. He stopped directly in front, waiting. But Bayezid did not lift his eyes. Not from defiance, but from something deeper. Defeat that had settled into bone. Timur's grip was light, but it might as well have been iron. He searched Bayezid's face for something: fear, rage, despair. What he found was nothing. No tremble, no flinch. Just the quiet gaze of a man who had already died 1,000 deaths in his mind. It unnerved him. Outside, the aftermath stretched endlessly. Smoke curled into the darkening sky. The cries of the dying were muffled by distance, but never silence. Timur's victory was total. Yet in his eyes, there was no joy. Only the weight of what it meant to break a man who would not break himself. He did not speak. He did not move to escape. But his hands betrayed him. They clung to the stool like it was the last piece of earth beneath his feet. Each breath was measured, deliberate. He was not a man waiting for death. He was a man choosing how to face it. Timur set the White King down with a soft click. He offered no words, no threats. Just the game. And still, Bayezid said nothing. He did not play. He did not refuse. He simply watched. As if the board were not a game, but a mirror reflecting the shape of empires. Timur traced the path of conquest with the patience of a man who had crossed deserts and rivers for this moment. He spoke of cities, of rivers, of the roads that would bear his banners now. Bayezid listened. Not because he cared, but because he knew every word was a nail in the coffin of his world. When the world was still, Bayezid finally moved. His lips formed words that no one heard. Prayers, perhaps. Or curses. The lantern above him swayed gently, casting shifting shadows that seemed to mock his stillness. He was a sultan without a throne, a flame without air. Timur did not need the stars to tell him where he was. He had mapped the heavens in his youth, read their movements like a language. Now, they whispered nothing new. Only the future he had carved with his own hands. And the question of what to do with the man who had once stood beside them. Sleep would not come. Not for pride, not for pain, but for the weight of what lay ahead. The storm rolled in like the tide, distant thunder echoing the chaos in his mind. He did not fear it. He welcomed it. Let the sky break. He had already lost everything. Timur entered without ceremony, the scroll unrolled in his grip. Bayezid did not rise. He did not need to. They both knew what it was. A decree. A sentence. A new chapter written in the ink of conquest. Timur stopped just inside the threshold and looked down. The storm had passed. Now came the reckoning. The silence stretched like a bowstring. Bayezid's eyes flickered over the decree, his fingers drumming against the arm of his seat. Timur's breath did not waver. He had given empires to trembling men and watched kings kneel. This was not mercy. It was reckoning. The words were not written in haste. Each stroke was measured, each clause a blade. He had not come to bargain. The scroll was not a request. It was a reckoning. One empire would rise. Another would fall. There would be no third choice. Bayezid did not speak. His silence was a weapon. Timur had seen it before. Kings who thought stillness was strength. But stillness could also be the calm before the blade fell. The thunder cracked again, closer now. Neither man flinched. The room held its breath. Servants lingered in the corners, forgotten. The air itself seemed to pause, waiting for a word, a gesture, a spark. One sentence could ignite war. One nod could end it. Neither man moved. The storm outside was nothing compared to what sat between them. He had crossed deserts and rivers of blood to stand here. He had burned cities and rebuilt them. This moment was no different. The boy who once dreamed of stars now held the fate of nations. He would not blink. He would not yield. Bayezid rose. Not in anger. Not in fear. But in acknowledgement. The gesture was not submission. It was challenge. He had not climbed to power by kneeling. And he would not let it slip from his fingers like dust in the wind. The scroll fell. Not by accident. Not by rage. But by design. The sound cracked louder than the storm. Timur did not look down. Bayezid did not flinch. Words were no longer needed. The game had changed. The board was set. Now came the real war. A servant moved. Swift. Silent. The scroll was lifted, unread. No one spoke. No one needed to. The decree had been delivered. The message received. What came next would not be written. It would be carved in steel and ash. Bayezid walked. Each step a heartbeat. Each heartbeat a warning. He did not speak. He did not need to. The air itself carried his intent. Timur did not retreat. He never had. They were both wolves. Only one would leave this room standing. The blade sang as it left its sheath. Not in rage. Not in haste. But in purpose. Timur had no words left. Only steel. Only truth. The storm above matched the one below. Thunder split the sky. The two rulers stood on the edge of history. One would be remembered. One would be forgotten. Steel met steel. The first blow rang like a bell across the chamber. Timur pressed forward, years of war behind every thrust. Bayezid answered with precision, each parry a lesson in control. They danced on the edge of empire, neither yielding, neither breathing space. The storm outside echoed their fury. Lightning cracked. Thunder rolled. Neither man flinched. The room fell away. Thrones, banners, all forgotten. Only the fight remained. Timur's blade carved through air like a scythe. Bayezid's countered, sharp and true. Each strike was question and answer. Each dodge a denial of fate. Blood dripped. Not enough to stop them. Never enough. The walls cracked. The ceiling groaned. Still they fought. Timur saw it then. Not victory. Not defeat. But end. His arm rose. Not for another attack. For something final. Bayezid understood. No words passed. None were needed. The old wolf knew when to strike. The young wolf knew when to meet it. Time slowed. The storm held its breath. Steel whispered promises. They moved as one. Not friends. Not enemies. Brothers in the only language that mattered. Blade found flesh. Blade found bone. They collapsed together. Not in weakness. In completion. The thunder above ceased. The rain began. Two empires wept through the sky. One would rise. One would fall. Both would remember. Morning came. Rain washed the stones clean. Servants entered in silence. They found them there. Not monsters. Not legends. Just men. The world would speak of this day forever. But in the quiet, in the dust, there was only peace. History had been written. In steel. In ash. In the space between breaths.